management work.
Sorry, I figured I better do that before I forget.
I don't want to put it on recording though.
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess I should say, well, the good news is that it's a contract position and you're starting something and we'll see what happens. That's the good news.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
emailed it to you. The
But the
link.
part you're not telling is how you negotiated the salary up, because they
Stop
wanted
being
to pay you crap and
disrespectful.
they're still paying you crap, but they're paying you a little more crap.
So it's good that I'm not telling the story right now because I haven't had my coffee and I won't be succinct. So then you will favor.
That's okay. Hello, everybody. We just let in. Good morning. If you're, you know how when you get on the airplane, they tell you, no, this is the flight to Newark, just in case you're on the right plane. This is the JVS Job Seekers Program. So make sure you're in the right webinar. And I will introduce myself in a moment. We'll give it one more minute to let people in. We only have about 40 people in and there's supposed to be 122. So people are straggling slowly. And I'm one of those, you know, obnoxious people who always comes to things early. Like I'm the one who gets on early and watches the circle go, and the host will let you in shortly. Like, no, I'm here.
It was a hilarious, I don't know what day it was. Trevor Noah did this bit about people being on time.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to Google it, I would Google
Okay, I'll have to do that. It was like,
Trevor Noah. Yeah.
okay, it's probably like on YouTube or something.
Yeah, yeah. And if I take a moment to stop, I'll look for the link. But right now I'm making coffee, so I'm going to put you on mute.
Okay. All right. It's 10:06 and we got a lot to cover. So I'm going to get started and all the other people will straggle in, and my wonderful secondhand Nancy Aronson with her amazingly bright and beautiful background is going to help me today and let people into the room while I'm chatting away. So I don't know, there were a lot of unfamiliar names when I was going through the registration list this morning to remind you all to come. So I'm going to, for those of you who are familiar, you can go get your coffee. But I'm Dr. Merrill Canner, and I am the Director for Career Counseling and Placement at JVS, which stands for Jewish Vocational Services. We are officially located in Livingston, Montclair, and East Orange. I am officially located in my home, which happens to be in Paramus, small capital of the world. And JVS is an international organization, and our motto is helping people help themselves. Let's mute whoever we can, Nancy, thank you. What we do is help people get on their feet and make them productive so they can go out into the world and take care of themselves and the people they love. We have various different clients in different departments. Some of the clients have physical and mental disabilities. We have a whole career center for people on the autism spectrum. We have a whole emigre department helping people with citizenship and computer skills and English as a second language. And then we have my department, which is called the Career Counseling and Placement Department. And I always say to people, I help middle income unemployed, which is a weird term, and I'm not sure it's really even accurate. But basically the clients I work with are from the mailroom to the boardroom and from 18 to 80. And my job is twofold. One is to make you the best job searcher you can be, which includes teaching you all the technical stuff like interviewing, resume, networking. And I think I have a little emphasis on networking. And the other part, which I feel is just or more important, is keeping you motivated and supported through your job search. JVS does have a very low cost sliding scale service. And if you want to learn more about it, I will put all my contact information into the chat box. We are fully funded by Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West. Some people don't like that I chat for so long at the beginning, but I'm sorry. This is a free service and this program is free, and it's because of donors who donate to Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West. So I'm going to thank them all for enabling us to do these programs and for us to have our services at low cost. We are also funded by the Helen Kozlowski Foundation in memory of Helen Kozlowski. And so we'd like to thank her, her family, her foundation for enabling us to do these programs. So if you have more questions about anything having to do with JVS, again, I will put my contact information into the chat box. All the programs since COVID, since April 4th, 2020, have been recorded since we went virtual and on Zoom, and they are mostly uploaded on a YouTube channel. And I already put that in there, and I will put it in several more times during the program. And finally, I don't even remember what was the last thing I was going to say. Oh, the chat box. We don't forget the chat. So everyone put yourself on mute for now. And then if you have a question, put the question into the chat box and put the word question in front of your question so we can find it amongst all the other things. And since I want you to be paying attention to this lovely woman who's going to give us an incredible presentation, but she has a lot to say. If you want to save the chat so that you have it to look at later and can follow up and network with the people who are putting their names in the chat, then just go to the chat box at the bottom where there are 3 little dots. Click on the 3 little dots that says more, and at the top it will say save chat. So do that, hit save chat, and I will remind you to do that again, because also if you don't do it at the end, then you don't get the whole thing or whatever. So we want you to save the chat and make sure you're fully here with us for the program, which is going to be amazing. So on that note, let me introduce our speaker. Rachel's early professional experience was at Goldman Sachs in operations. From there, she was trained as a coach at NYU and became a certified coach, the International Coaching Federation. She worked in HR research and attained a technology MBA at NYU Stern. Wow. Throughout her career, she'd helped hundreds of professionals with career exploration. And for the past 4.5 years, she's been building her company called WOKEN. She'll tell you about that, which is an online career exploration platform. As with all of our speakers, Rachel has volunteered her time. This is her 2nd time presenting. This is an encore, although the last one was a different topic, and I'm sure this one will be just as amazing. So Rachel, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm going to just get my chat open here. So I see everyone's writing in the chat, so I will keep this chat open. And if you do have questions, feel free to throw them in there, and I will try to actually answer them throughout the session or at the end. So feel free to throw questions in there, and I'm going to just simply dive right in. So we're going to talk about interviews today. You know, Meryl mentioned my background already. Happy to talk about any of that if it's helpful. I will skip over this for now. Okay, so today we're going to talk about interview strategy, best practices and guidance. We're going to talk about how to prepare and practice, how to actually sort of interview them back, as well as how to follow up after, how to assess offers, and we're actually going to have some mock interview time as well. Okie dokie. So best practices. In terms of interviews, right? These are sort of my top tips. Your aim is to speak clearly, concisely, and comprehensively. And by the way, that's why it's difficult to be concise and comprehensive at the same time. It's not easy, and that's why we have to practice this. So my best tip for how to actually achieve that is to structure and organize your thoughts. So step 1 is always pausing before you speak. As they are actually asking you a question, you can actually have a blank piece of paper in front of you, and you might be jotting down some keywords that come to your mind while they're even asking you a question. You can also buy time, and you can say, great question, let me think about that for a second. You can actually pause for 2 or 3 seconds. I know it might feel uncomfortable, but to be honest, they're just going to be sitting there in silence, and they're probably going to forget about the fact that there was 2 or 3 seconds. And if anything, they're going to really see that you're being really thoughtful and, you know, careful with your speech, and that's actually going to look positively on you. So take all the time you need. And you know that even like myself, we're trying to speak slower today. It's a new practice, so you have to try to literally practice. How do you both speak slower? How do you pause before you speak? So even when you're doing mock interviews, practice how you pause, how you might write down some thoughts, how you might take 2 or 3 seconds of silence. So really practice those things. I like to use these keywords. So as you're writing on your piece of paper, you're literally just going to write a few different keywords that represents each of the different ideas or themes or buckets of information. So again, this allows you to be comprehensive, right? Because if they ask you a question, if you can only answer in a minute or 2, and yet you have to share a lot of your thoughts, it's okay to say, well, you know, first I think about this, and second I think about this, and third I think about this. They can always ask you to dive in deeper But in order to show them that you're considering a lot of different criteria or factors or whatever it may be, that's really the way that they're going to trust you to operate independently. So these keywords that you're jotting down are representing what are all the components that you want to talk about? What are all the important parts of this answer? You can actually use transition words to even remind yourself to start to organize your thoughts, right? So if you noticed how I was just saying, well, first I think about this, next I think about this, you might be thinking while you're talking, but using transition words is going to actually remind yourself to, organize your sentences and organize your ideas, or rather organize your thoughts into different ideas and separating those ideas. So as I mentioned, comprehensively accounting for key criteria, that is how they're going to trust you to independently operate. And so even if you feel like you're, talking for too long and yet you didn't get to everything, well, again, first of all, we want to practice so that you can try to get to as many things as you can. But if you had to, at the very end, you could say, there's a few other things that I consider that I didn't really get time to dive into, but I would make sure to think about A, B, C, D, and E. Happy to touch on those things, if you'd like me to, right? So it's okay to be comprehensive, even if you can't fully flesh out every single idea. You want to tell them what it is you're thinking about, what it is you're considering, and then that's where it becomes conversational, because they may very well say, oh, actually, can you tell me about how you do think about that, one component? You do want to give stories as much as humanly possible. Stories, I know this might sound obvious, but it's going to really remind them. And by the way, sometimes their reactions are almost, sorry, hold on, I'm going to make sure we're muted here. Okay. The stories will actually subconsciously just simply remind them of your own capabilities. Even if the story is a little bit different than what it is they asked, you still want to remind them of the most relevant, most similar experience that you've had. And I'm sure you guys have learned the STAR framework. We can always touch on the STAR framework together. But you want to tell that story. And even at the end of the story, you can say, in your case, I might change up A, B, C, and D because it's a little different. But, you want to give as much relevant examples as humanly possible. You always want to be authentic, right? So if you're ever worried about what do they want to hear, what do I think they want to hear, never try to force it, right? They are going to hear that. They are going to smell that. So always, if you're not sure what to say, err on the side of being authentic. It will come across so much stronger because they want to get to know you as a person, right? They want to see if they're going to work with you all day, every day, and what you're actually like. So just, if you're ever unsure in the moment, err on the side of just being you, because you are a professional, you have had work experiences, you have value, and you know how to communicate more than you think. As much as, yes, you can practice, just err on the side of simply, your gut if you're not sure. I like to say it's 50% skills, 50% rapport, right? Be yourself, smile, enjoy it, have fun. If they ask you a question, or sorry, if you think of a question in the moment, you can ask it, right? Like, just, they want to see if they would want to hang out with you all day, pretty much, right? The culture fit is important. Do you vibe? Do you get along? As well as, can you do the job? Do you understand the requirements? And have you done these similar things before? You want to remove all your distractions in the moment, right? So I like to say you want a blank piece of paper and a pen, and you want your list of questions for them. If you're having a Zoom call, make sure it's your full screen. You do not need any other tabs. You do not need your notes. You probably don't even need your resume. You want to be engaged. You want to be focused, because whatever prep you've done up until that point, that's how you're showing up. You've done that prep. So now the best thing you can do is just simply be there and be as focused as you can. And the level of the questions is interesting, right? If they ask you a really broad, high-level question, you can give a high-level answer. It's okay to give context, to say, well, this is absolutely, a big topic. And the way that I think about it is A, B, C, and D. But if you wanted me to dive deeper into the specifics of any of these, I absolutely can do that. So remember the level. Sometimes people, when they hear a high level question, they just jump into the weeds and they jump into the lower level details. So just make sure you're answering at the same level that they're asking you that question. Okay. So how to prepare and practice. So of course, if you're doing research, you want to learn about the company from their website, as well as where they appear in the news. And you want to simply, I like to take handwritten notes on the entire website and naturally see what questions arise as you're taking those notes. I like to treat it like a research project, pretend you were doing research for any work project, or I like to think, it's almost as if I was in school taking notes. Your brain is naturally going to start to connect the dots and think of really good questions as you're absorbing that information. In terms of practice, you want to write down, I say every story, but I would think of like, depending on how long you were in a prior role, at least 1 or 2 or 3 stories per role, if not more. And you really just want to write down with that STAR format, and let me know if you guys want to review the STAR format. But you really want to write down every single story with STAR, as many stories as you can. These are tools in your toolbox. And that way, during the conversation, you just simply have stories ready to go. And in the moment, you can simply decide what story is the best one to tell right now. Use every bullet of the job posting and just really ask yourself, if I had to conceptually explain my understanding or approach as it relates to this type of responsibility, how would I explain my understanding of that concept, as well as how would I explain an example story of when I've done that before? Really simple, really straightforward. Use that job posting to help you. And of course, use the top behavioral questions that you know to expect. Tell me about a challenge, tell me about your biggest achievement, failure, strengths, weaknesses, interpersonal conflict. These are things you can prepare for. And then, ask yourself, what do I know they're going to ask me about, right? If you understand the role, the team, the work, you can actually come up with the questions that, you think make sense given what it is the role entails. And I would just really try to give yourself a routine around this. So maybe once a day, you pick a new question, you actually say it out loud, right? Practicing out loud. I cannot say enough how much this is going to just improve your confidence and your comfort level with just interviewing in general. So I like to start by just writing down what are the keywords that represent the ideas of what it is I want to include in this answer. And then you say it out loud a few times. Every single time you say it, you're going to refine it and you're going to improve it. And it's kind of like you're acting, you're getting off script. So the things that you're actually memorizing are, what are the parts of this answer? What are the core ideas or themes that I want to hit? But it's okay to say it naturally every single time. What you're really preparing is, what are the key components that I want to make sure to say for this question? And if you have limited time, if you have nothing else, I say, if nothing else, if you have limited time, why this role, why you, why this team or department, why this company, and why this industry? If you have no other time, those are the few basics that you can prepare before an interview. Cool. So this is just an example of, like, if you were to write down some keywords, what would it look like, right? Like literally strengths. If you notice, I just picked literally the 3 words. Now, if you were to answer that question, of course, you would flesh out each one. But what you're memorizing is, okay, what are the actual 3 strengths that I want to share? For example, if you're picking stories, tell me about a challenge you faced and how you overcame it. You can use that STAR framework, but you can literally just write very briefly the reminder for what was the situation, what was the task or the problem, what was the actions of how you went about it, and what was the result. In this case, I'm being very, very, very brief. You could use, just a few keywords, but you want to just truncate the ideas, and that way you're memorizing the organization and the framework of your answer. Okay, let me see if there's any questions here in the chat. Okay, good. Thank you, Nancy, for that. STAR format, beautiful. Okay, so good. Thank you for this. So STAR is situation, which simply means anytime you tell a story, what's the context? What was the organization? What was the role title? Where were you? Were you part of a team? Very briefly, paint the picture so we know where this story happened. The T is the task, but it's really like, what was the problem? What was the goal? What was the task at hand? Give us what it is the story's all about. And then the action is, how did you go about resolving it? What were the steps that you took to actually whether it's solving a problem, building out a process, or whatever it is you were doing, what are the steps that you took? What were the actions you took? And then the R is the results. It's really the metrics, the outcomes, the impact. How did this all resolve in the end? Okay, so continue to let me know if you guys have questions. I'm looking at this chat. Beautiful. Okay, so now interviewing the company comprehensively. Okay, so when they say, what questions do you have for me? The number one thing I like to do when you are asking questions is really prove that you're already thinking strategically about the work. Your questions can actually prove your knowledge and your understanding of the work itself. You can ask about the challenges and the strategies and the opportunities. Pretend it was day one on the job. What would you ask your manager if you were to really be, ready to thrive in that role? Those are the best kinds of questions. However, we also want you to ask questions to make sure this is the right fit for you. And sometimes these questions can be asked after the offer is already in your hand, and that's okay. It's a matter of just making sure at some point you are comprehensively asking what it is you need, because sometimes saying no is the right thing if you know you're not going to do well there or be happy there, right? So you first need to get to know your priorities, right? What's the as it relates to the work, the role, and the team, right? So what do you want to be doing all day? Do you want to travel? What should the style and the pace of the work be? Does the role align with the work that you're most natural at? The industry, right? So what is the product? What is the service? Do you actually find it important or interesting? Are you going to be happy to contribute towards that mission? The environment, right? Instead of saying, what's the culture? Because think about it this way, the way that they want specific, honest answers out of you, you want that out of them. So when you phrase it, you want to be creative with how you phrase your questions so that you get a really good answer. You want to try to elicit stories the same way they try to elicit stories. So you could actually say, tell me about a time when, right? Like, for example, I love to feel empowered in my workplace to bring up new ideas, right? So I might say, tell me about a time when, someone on the team brought up a new idea and how that went. And they might say something like, well, Jane brought this up and now she's actually running with the idea today, or Jane brought this up and it's actually in the backlog and we review that every 12 months. So you're going to get a picture of how they operate, how they work, get examples, get stories, understand how they actually do things. So be really creative with what is it you really need to know. The hours and the flexibility, the growth, the learning, the development, the promotion, leadership, exposure, the benefits. I mean, it's okay to ask every question. Typically during interviews, you might not have time, but it's okay to ask this after the offer's in your hand. You just want to remember it's a two-way shared assessment of fit, okay? As I mentioned, the phrasing of your questions is key. Write down how you want to ask this question beforehand. It's okay to reference your piece of paper. You can ask for another call post-offer, like we mentioned, and you can really reflect on prior roles. What do you know that you need in an environment to thrive? What do you know that you cannot have in an environment, right? So what was not great about prior roles and what was great about prior roles, and actually turn each of those things into a question. Any uncertainties that you have, anything you're not aware of, anything you're not sure of, you want to turn all of those things into questions. And actually landing a networking call with someone in the company who's outside of your interview process is one of the best ways to get an objective read on the culture of the company. Any questions so far? I'm looking at the chat. All right. Forging forward here. Okay. Oh, be specific, be creative, be concrete, and be comprehensive. The 3 C's: creative, concrete, and comprehensive when you're asking questions, okay? All right. So how to follow up. I usually like to do like a T+4 business days later. I feel like it's a nice balance of polite and persistent. You want to stay warm. I find that sometimes candidates are hesitant to follow up, or sometimes they want to follow up the next day, or they follow up 2 weeks later. Have a nice balance. Give or take once a week later is a really nice way to say, I'm still here. Here's why I'm a fit. Here's why I'm interested. You can make your follow-ups really meaningful and robust and specific and actually value-added emails. I like to do about 3 follow-ups. And then if you really are hearing radio silence, you can sort of leave it be and you can reconnect with them later down the road. You want to reiterate your fit and interest, as I mentioned, but you want to show rather than tell. So don't just say, I'm a strong fit, I'm really interested. Actually, try to come up with what is a brief way you can actually explain why you're a fit, right? You just learned so much about the role in the interview. So what makes you actually know you're a fit? What makes you so interested? It's, you can take 10, 15 minutes to really come up with what is a brief and yet meaningful way to actually say what I'm trying to say. You'd be surprised that authentic emails can really go a long way. Thought leadership, you can actually use this time to share additional questions or ideas, share an article, share updates of what you're working on, write a blog and share it, show that you're already thinking about the work. Again, that's a way of showing versus telling that you are ready for that role. And anytime you follow up as well, you want to be specific with your questions. So don't just say, do you have any updates? What's the timeline? What are the next steps? Do you have updates? Do you have any follow-up questions? Either do you have follow-up questions, or maybe ask if they have follow-up questions for you. Offer to hop on another call. Ask if they have feedback. Make it a specific, meaningful email that's worthwhile to respond to. Cool. Kristen, I'm seeing your question. So how can you land a networking call with someone outside the process? So Kristen, there's a lot that we could talk about with networking, right? So the quick answer is you want to try to get introductions as much as you can. If you're not receiving a reply, it's probably based on, is it a cold connection or a warm connection or an introduction, or do you have something in common? Can you find an alumni, from your alma mater? Can you find something in common where you can reach someone by, way of introduction, or some way to get a warm connection to someone who works there? The other thing would be either what you say in your outreach. So you really want to focus on learning from them. Sometimes not mentioning the role is helpful. You just want to talk about what is it you would want to ask them on the call? And maybe you list out a few topics that would be worthwhile to chat about on a phone call, so that way they see that you're prepared to use their time wisely. The other thing would be where you reach out. I personally like to try to find their email address over LinkedIn messaging. So if you're not receiving a reply, I would think about, is it a warm or cold connection, where you're reaching out, and what you're saying. Those are really my rules of thumb. Faye, in terms of the thank you email, if it takes you forever, I would try to get another pair of eyes, right? So maybe Meryl can help you. I'm happy to help you. Or maybe just a peer or a mentor. I think if you're taking forever, it's probably, it might be because you're just sort of in your head. It's okay to be really thoughtful and robust, but I don't think you need more than 20 minutes, to write a really good email. So trust yourself. Remember that you've been in various work settings before where you've had to write good emails, and you just don't want to trip yourself up. You don't need to get overly nervous about the email. Try to use these best practices, and get another pair of eyes if it's going to help you try to move through the email a little bit more quickly, or maybe get a little feedback, so that you can feel like, is this, I find that if somebody's taking too long, it's like they don't know if it's good enough, or, sometimes getting some feedback might help you to say, okay, I'm confident to send this email. Because emails, we can work on them for hours on it, but it's not worth it, right? We need to just say, what should go in this email? Let me make sure it feels reasonable, given what I know it should entail, and then let me get it out there. A thank you email should definitely be spent within 24 hours after the interview. And so what I'm talking about here with this slide is, there's the thank you, and then there's the follow-ups, right? So once a week, I usually recommend about 3 follow-ups, and then you can pause. If you're hearing radio silence after 3 weeks, just take a beat and you can reconnect with them maybe in 2 or 3 weeks down the road. Okay, let's see. Okay, good. I don't think I'm missing anything, but let me know if I am. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, so assessing offers, saying your yes or no. So of course, your personal financial runway is the #1 thing. If you need the job, it's okay to say yes, right? But if you have a little time on your side, be thoughtful about if this is the right opportunity, because I know it's difficult to say no, but sometimes having the courage to say no might open you up to the right things. If it's truly not right for you, you don't want to put yourself in a bad environment or a bad situation. Use the responses, of course, to your questions to gauge, how did they answer your questions? That's kind of why we have this slide here. You need to ask all this stuff in order to assess, is this a fit for me, right? And so remember that even if you receive a response that feels a little vague or fluffy, that's an answer. Okay, so listen to what they're saying and listen to what they're not saying. If you ask something and they're not giving you the specifics around it, you can either ask the same thing in different words, but by the second time you try to ask that thing, I would try to, gauge what you're hearing and what you're not hearing. You can do a little bit of a rating system, right? So how's the role in terms of fit, 1 to 10? How's the industry in terms of fit, 1 to 10? How's the culture in terms of fit, 1 to 10? Using numbers is a good coaching tactic to just gauge how you feel. It's, of course, we could talk about, okay, what is the scale? But it's your own scale, right? It's what is a 10 out of 10 to you? And that's, again, knowing your priorities, knowing what's a fit for you. How does this stack up? If you had to use a gut number, and then you can actually say, okay, if it's a 6 out of 10, what are the things that aren't so great? Are there concerns? Are there questions? You can ask for another call. I like to say at least a 7 out of 10 on average, but ideally it's an 8 or a 9 or a 10, but even a minimum 7 would be a green light for me personally. But this is a really good place to get perspective from a mentor, a peer, a coach. Really talk it out with somebody, because sometimes it's hard to gauge, like, what is a red flag? Like, if you're concerned about something, get another opinion, right? Because you don't want to enter, like, if you have a hesitation, trust that you should really think through that, and you should really consider that, and maybe talk about it with someone that you trust, whether it's a family member or a friend. Ideally, it's an objective opinion. So a mentor, a coach, a peer, sometimes our family. That's a whole other conversation of the influences that we have. But if any trusted person to get some perspective, career coaches can be particularly helpful, because we have so many examples of the different things that we hear. So we can give you perspective on, does that really sound like a red flag? Does that sound toxic or not? Okay. Any questions? Yes. When connecting with a company insider, it's okay to ask them for advice on the fit to the role or hiring manager expectations. If not, what can I do to keep the conversation going, to keep in touch with them? I'm not sure I totally understand what you're saying, Priya. So ask them for advice on the fit to the role. Oh, I see. And hiring manager expectations. So, okay, the bottom line is, yes, first of all, you can and should ask anything, to these people. So if it's a company insider, ideally, yes, they would have an understanding of what is the nature of this role. Like, they're going to understand the nuances and the reality of that role. You absolutely can try to get a deeper, more accurate sense of that role. In terms of the hiring manager expectations, they may or may not know that person, but of course you can ask, if there's anything they can share given their exposure to that team, to that hiring manager. There is a way of politely, professionally trying to get to know that hiring manager. And I think that's very much okay to ask, but they may not know that person. And so if they don't know that person, I think it's okay for you to also come up with questions that you want to ask to the hiring manager directly. There is a way of assessing what it is you need to assess by still phrasing it in a polite and professional way and still getting the information that you need. In terms of keeping in touch and keeping the conversation going, it depends. I don't know if you're referring to the company insider or the hiring manager, but with any person that you're trying to keep in touch, honestly, the company insider. Okay. So ideally you would land a networking call with that person. If you're just simply trying to keep in touch, I would say it comes back to just your general follow-up tips in general, right? Which is, okay, figure out a good timeline, right? Like, do you want to, do they mention keep me updated on the hiring process? Do they want to stay in the loop? Or maybe, in a week or two, you give them an update. If they are on the inside of a company that you're interviewing with and you had a really good networking conversation, I think it's totally okay to keep them updated. If it's simply, you're just trying to build a relationship, then maybe every 2 to 3 months, you could, reconnect with them if you have updates or questions or whatever it may be. Let me know if I'm missing anything. Okay, good. Okay, beautiful. All right, I'm going to continue forward here. How to think about your next work opportunity. So this is just a little bonus. I have a little bit of bonus content for you. So the way that I like to think about it is really in these 3 parts. So the first part is the role. The role is the function of what are you doing all day, every day. I like to think about the pie chart of where you're dividing your time. What are the skills, the activities, the projects, the style of the work? What are you doing all day and what's natural for you to be doing all day? Where are your strengths and what do you enjoy doing? The second area is the content. What is the nature of the work? If you are a data analyst, if you are an engineer, if you are a salesperson, what is the product? What is the service? What is the industry? What is the sector? What are the problems that you actually want to talk about and think about? What topics do you find important or interesting? Those are 2 separate things, the style of the work and then the actual, problem that you're working towards. And the third piece is the environment and the culture that you're a part of. What's the size of the organization, the pace, the stage of the organization, the culture, of course, it's all the bells and whistles of what does it really look and feel like. So this is a 3-part framework that you can use to both figure out what it is you want going forward, as well as to assess any work, any offer or any, future career direction. Okay, let me pull up this question. So is it okay to reject take-home tests if they are requested too early in the process? If a company asks you to do a task before the first or second interview, looks like a huge red flag. So Simona, that's a really good question. This is a really tough one, and interview processes have, changed over time, and it also depends on the role. Like I've seen a lot for software engineers, they might like totally start out with, an upfront, exercise or task or project. So I, as a candidate personally, wouldn't necessarily reject something, from the get-go, right? Because they hopefully have been thoughtful about what it is they need to assess. And if they need to assess your hard skills as the first thing in the process, then I would, try to understand, what it is they're doing and why. I think there's probably a light way that you could, offer a 10-minute chat and you could say, I'd love to learn more about this role and, the fit with my background. If you're willing to hop on the phone for 5-10 minutes, if you could offer that, you could absolutely try. I recognize that projects and take home things can take you time. The other thing you can do is actually ask how much time they suggest you work on that. Because if they recommend, 3 to 5 hours, I would say don't do more than double the amount of time. And sometimes they actually time it as well if it's like a timed thing. I don't think I would reject it. I think I would be creative to try to see what it is you need and can you offer a call or can you ask for a call if you're not sure if the role is a fit. I think if you're really specific and clear in what it is you're asking and why you're asking for a quick phone call, usually a recruiter, would be open to that. But I wouldn't necessarily say, can I do the interview before the take home? Can you, figure out what it is you really need? Do you just simply need to gauge if this role is a fit? In which case you could probably do that on a 10-minute phone call, right? So it's okay to be yourself, ask for what you need, but recognize there's probably some method to the madness, even though I know sometimes these processes are not perfect.
Rachel, can I just build on that with a question for you? Because I've had this, especially a lot of my marketing clients, where they'll be asked to put together this like whole marketing plan. And very often they don't get the job and then they find out later that a lot of their ideas were stolen.
Yes.
So how do you handle something like that in terms of how deep you go into doing the project they ask or whatever?
So I just was talking about this with a client. I think a good way to do, and by the way, this is a great question and it's a problem, to be honest, but okay, so the first thing is I would always ask them, how much time do you suggest that I take on this? Because again, if they say 3 to 5 hours, 4 to 6 hours, I would not take, like say they say 4 to 6 hours, I would not do more than 10 hours on it. And then what you can actually do as a little trick is at the end of your slide, you could say, given the amount of time on this, here are the next steps that I would take. Here are the different things I would consider. Here are the things I would look into. Here are the things I would do next. You can still give them insight as to your thought process, your approach, the things on your mind, what it is you would do. You could even give them a 3-month roadmap of how you would actually go about this project. But that doesn't mean you have to take 20 hours to do the thing. You just have to show them how you would think about it. And you could do that in 20 minutes. You could say, how do I think about this problem? What are the criteria? What are the factors that are important to consider or to do as a next step? And, depending on the company, if they don't really have a full-time role, if you think they might be open to like a consultant or something like that, this could be an interesting way to say, if you'd like for me to, spend the next 2 to 4 weeks on this project, I'd be really happy to explore, an interim, part contract, something like that, right? So it's a good way to sort of hook them. Like, imagine you're a freelancer and you're doing like a proposal and you're trying to land a client. It's kind of a similar thing, right? Like, you want to sort of sell them on, how do they know you could do this well? How did they understand your approach and your background and your knowledge and your expertise and the fact that you would go about this in a really good way? How do they know that you have the right goals in mind? How do they know that you have the right questions? How do they know that you have the right process? That doesn't mean you have to do all of the stuff, right? That's what I would keep in mind. Try to hook them, try to sell them on a part-time contract. It's tough. This stuff is tough. There's no perfect answer. These are some of my like creative tips I think that will help. Those are my first initial thoughts on it. Yes, teaser slide, yes. But offer great value, but can offer in-depth information. But once you're paid to do that, exactly. Yeah, and look, it's a delicate balance. But you have to go in knowing, like, if they are hiring for a full-time job and that, you can have that teaser slide. But if you feel like it's a smaller company and maybe they'd be open to like, a shorter contract, you can actually mention that. So, it's worth it to talk with a coach or a mentor or a peer to try to figure out how to navigate it depending on that company. But absolutely, I think it's okay to show them your understanding, your approach, your thought process, your knowledge, the fact that you understand the goals without doing everything in the project, if that makes sense. Okay, amazing, beautiful. All right, I'm going to keep going and let me move this chat over here. Okay. Beautiful. All right. I just want to briefly explain career exploration. If you are not sure on what your next step is, career exploration is a process of learning about the different roles, learning about the different industries, and getting to a place where you feel confident on what the next step is that you really feel is the best fit for you in your career. I just bring this up quickly because it will show through. If you are having interviews for a lot of different roles, you're probably confusing yourself and confusing them. It's really hard to be genuine and authentic and compelling in an interview if you don't have the answers for yourself. Why are you a fit for this role? Why are you interested in this industry? So career exploration is the process of independently trying to answer those questions for yourself before you have to answer it for an interviewer. So just remember, it's okay to take a step back. If there's still options on your radar, I would really try to figure out what is the best direction for you, because that is totally, that due diligence that you can do with yourself, it's going to shine through in the interview when you can really prove to them that you understand truly, genuinely, and deeply the fact that you understand what this role entails, why you're excited about it, why you're a fit for it, why it makes the most sense for you. That's the candidate who really shines. So don't be afraid to take a step back, to ask yourself the interview questions and really get good answers around it so that you can show up 10 times easier when that interview does roll around. This is just super quickly, like, again, what career exploration is. Even if you're mid-career, it is the process of really figuring out, let me do a little research, let me do a little networking, and let me literally just simply figure out what role and what industry actually feels right for my next step, given whatever you're looking for, given whatever you want to work on, given whatever makes sense for you in terms of your growth and your direction. There's a way to simply just be in that process of figuring out what is the right next step. I'm not going to go through this super deeply, but I just want to let you know that these tools are here for you if you need it, and it will benefit you in the job search. Okay, Thank you, Priya. Love that. Okay, so I like to just shine my top 3 tips for job searching as well. And then I think this is actually towards the end of my slides, and we're going to get into the mock interview prep ASAP. So the top 3 things that I think about is number 1, are you being transactional, or are you thinking about who you want to talk to? What do you want to talk about? Why do you want to talk about it? When do you want to talk about it? Where do you want to talk about it? Bring it back to the root. If it's networking or if it's an interview, it is a mirror into the work that you might be doing, right? So if you're not enjoying the nature of the conversation, rethink about who you want to talk to, where you want to have those conversations, why you want to have those conversations. These conversations are talking about solving problems. What problems and how do you want to go about solving it, right? If you're not in the right conversation, maybe there's a different role or a different industry that you should be looking at. I like to think about, are you just simply checking the box, heads down, or are you actually taking a step back to say, what efforts am I actually doing and how can I pivot my approach? We don't want to be doing the same thing over and over without really thinking about how to tweak, what's not working. And that takes a little bit of, measurement and reflection, at least on a weekly basis. Think about where you feel least confident, what's not working, right? If you're getting messages, if you're sending messages without a reply, let's take a step back. Let's measure what's working, what's not. How can we get some guidance to tweak our approach and see better outcomes from trying some new different things? And the last thing is, are you clear in which role and which industry is the best next step for you? Or are you applying to a multitude of things? If you're applying to a multitude of things, you're going to overwhelm yourself and you're going to underwhelm your interviewer. So really try to get clear on what it is you want next and what makes sense for you. If your career search or your interview isn't fun, your job won't be either. So, it kind of goes back to the conversations. Who do you want to talk to? Are you enjoying it? Do you find it intriguing? Do you find this topic innovative and important? If not, let's go back to the drawing board and figure out where else we should be looking, right? They're going to see that. They want to hire somebody who's engaged and excited to be there and actually wants to think about this work. So really think about, how you're feeling. I know job search is difficult and it takes persistence and patience and resilience, but you should be enjoying most parts of it, at least when you are connecting with other people and you're talking about the work. So I'm just going to explain really quickly. This is what I do. I know you have a Merrill and you have JVS, which is awesome. But just so you know, you're welcome to get in touch with me. I always offer a free initial call. And so I have tools to guide individuals through all of these different processes and make sure you feel supported in what to do, how to do it, why to do it, when to do it, where to do it. And we want to make sure that every single professional feels supported with every career decision and really knowing that you can and should find a job you love. And of course, I will put the link so you know where to get in touch with me. Okay, so I'm going to actually put these links here so you have it. And we are ready for some mock interview prep. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Awesome. Okay, so does anyone want to volunteer for some mock interview prep with me, where I'm going to ask you a question? You could either bring a question that you want to practice, or we can use some of these suggestions. Does anybody want to?
I stopped the sharing of screen if you're wondering what happened. That way it'll be easier to see people when they're doing it. So do we have any volunteers in the audience who are willing to have answer one question, whatever question you decide, or Rachel does, and then you'll do a little practice and then she'll give you some feedback.
Okay, I see a hand, Pierre. I'm happy to start with you if you're ready to go. All right.
Now, wait 1 second. There's a way for me to make it so it's the two of you on.
Oh, yes, we can spotlight.
Spin.
Yes, we can spotlight.
Yes.
So I can do that if you, okay, there we go. You got it. And let me just spotlight. Okay.
Oh, good. Perfect. Thank you.
We're here and we're in the hot seat. Okay. So Pierre, do you have a question you want to practice, or do you want me to just throw anything at you?
I think I always struggle with, why are you a great fit for this organization?
Okay. For this organization, not the role, correct?
Or the role.
Okay. Well, why don't we do a two-parter? Because by the way, that's always that always throws people off. Just remember, you're organizing your thoughts. If they throw a two-part question, you're going to have a two-part answer, right? So, okay. So now, Pierre, do you have an example in mind? Like if you had to pick an example company just to pretend?
Geez. Let's say, I don't know, Facebook.
All right. Awesome. So, and sorry, do you have an example role in mind as well? Oh, wait, sorry, you went on mute.
There we go. So Facebook / Meta, data analyst.
Okay, perfect. All right. So Pierre, I'm so excited to chat with you today. Tell me, why are you a great fit for this role, as well as why are you a great fit for this organization?
Sure. I believe that I am a passionate data analyst, and I'm very interested in not just, how data works, but also in, the people who are, interacting with that data, and finding a way in which to, massage that data to give the, best product that we can.
Cool. And why are you a fit for Facebook?
Well, I've been a user since the days, before, it opened to the general public, when it was only available to university students. And I've grown with, the online culture, and it's always been a passion of mine, social media, and I would enjoy, working with, like-minded people.
Okay, awesome. Good work. I've got some thoughts. So, okay, so when somebody says to you, like, why are you a fit for this role? What's interesting about that question is, if they had already asked you your strengths, you can actually sort of refer to your answer and build on that and say, given these 3 top strengths, I know that those are going to lend itself well because of my understanding of what this role entails. So you can actually tie your understanding of the role to your strengths. If they hadn't yet asked you your strengths, you can actually kind of use that, which I'm sure you have that prepared as a separate question. You can actually use your 3 strengths and then explain both what you're natural at and why do you know that, given what the role entails, why is your strength actually going to lend itself really well and really naturally? And you can just pick 3 things. I think for you, you have a little bit of room. I think you're speaking very concisely, which is good. But it's a fine line to find the balance of like how much to talk. And so I think you have more breathing room. I think you can talk for a little bit more. Now, that is all predicated on, do you know what you want to say? So you might be talking quickly because you're not sure, and I can hear you're thinking while you're talking, which is okay. This is where the practice comes into play, because you're going to expect this question. So I want you to practice this question like 5 times, like later today or tomorrow. When you do that, you're actually going to be figuring out, how can I add a little meat on the bones of this, right? How can I add a little bit extra context? It's an art to how do you figure out how much detail to give while not talking too much. Not easy to do, but I think you have a little bit of extra room. I also think pausing is going to help you, right? So remember, the proactive practice that you're going to do every single day is really going to do wonders. But in the moment, and again, anybody who else comes up here, I really want you to pretend this is for real. Have a piece of paper in front of you, have a pen. While I'm asking you the question, if you notice, I try to give a little breathing room as if somebody were to be conversational. So I say, Pierre, I'm so glad to chat with you today. Why are you such a strong fit for this role as a data analyst? And why are you, so I'm talking, I'm giving jargon. They're probably going to do the same. They're probably going to talk for too much anyway. Use that time to your advantage. You're thinking while they're asking you stuff. And guess what? If you have to say, great question, let me think about that. I want you to go to your piece of paper and jot down 2 or 3 things, even if it's silent for 3 seconds. I know that sounds weird and it's going to feel weird, but I can guarantee you after this interview, they're not going to be like, oh my God, there was 3 seconds of silence. But the amount of thinking you can do in 3 seconds, right? We are complex humans. So trust yourself and take the time you need to be thoughtful and prepared. The last thing you want is to walk away from these conversations like, I didn't say this, I didn't include the thing I wanted to include, right? The other thing I would say is, in terms of the role, you know, you mentioned that you were passionate, you mentioned people interacting with data, you mentioned the massaging of the data. I think you mentioned your understanding of the role, but I'm not sure if you really explained the connection between your strengths and the understanding. So to me, that's what they're asking when they say, why are you fit for this role?
Would this be a point where I would throw in like an additional story that I've told earlier on during the interview or elaborate on one?
You can reference, if there's a prior answer that like totally, you know, is like relevant, you can just reference and say, you know, as you noticed, when I was telling you the story about my data analyst project, this is something that comes really natural to me. And as I understand it, this role entails A, B, C, and D. And those are all things that I've really honed before. So you know, what's interesting again about the practice, when you do this day in and day out, what you're actually asking yourself is, would it be best for me to answer this in a story, or would it be best for me to answer this conceptually? It's a little hard to do both in a short time period. So again, this is why we have to ask ourselves, what's the best framework? Should I give a story? Should I give a conceptual answer here? I think personally, for why are you best fit for this role, you can reference prior answers, but I do think it's a conceptual question of, what are your strengths? Do you understand deeply what this role entails? And why do the two connect? That's my take on this. When they ask you, why are you fit for this company? Now, by the way, that question is hard, especially for companies that are major companies like Facebook. It's like, why? Like, of course, it's a big company. Like, obviously, we want to work there, right? So this is the place to get specific and creative. What is it that you know about what they do, how they do it, why they do it? What do they do special, well, or differently? Have you spoken with somebody out at the company, maybe, that you can actually reference a prior conversation where you can actually say you actually know what the culture is like because you've spoken to somebody there, and you can reference the nuances that you already understand about that company. Do you want to show that you've done your homework? You know, these are obvious things. We know you're a user, right? But like, what else is going on in the news? What about the future trend of the innovation? What is important about what they do? And maybe what's questionable about what they do? And maybe you want to, it's okay to be honest and say, there's a really important impact that Facebook has on society. And I think it's really important to be really careful about, you know, how we deliver the impact, you know, to Facebook right now. It's a bit dicey. You know, it's okay to show that you understand the place that it plays in society. Like, you know, again, this requires the thoughtfulness and the practice, and whether it's prep in the moment, whether it's pausing in the moment, or the prep up front. I know I'm totally putting you on the spot, but be specific, you know, be thorough, be honest, be authentic, right? And I know you are, because you're saying, oh, I'm a user, but you want to show that you really have a genuine, authentic take on, why is Facebook interesting to you? Like, genuinely, right? Like, okay, you're telling me you're a user, like, okay, right? So like, go one step deeper. Why is that company important or impactful or innovative or intriguing? Or maybe it's dicey, maybe it's questionable, maybe, you know, there's something we have to really be thoughtful about as it relates to what it is they do and how they do it, right? So try to really be as specific and authentic as you can as to what the company actually means to you. It's really hard when it's such a big company, because it's like, it's obvious, like we all know, you know, okay, whatever, it's a great big company. So really think about it. You know, what does it mean to you? Does it mean something? Is it, you know, something that you really believe in? Or is it something where you think, you know, we've got to be really, you know, thoughtful about how we deliver this product? I think a Facebook employee would be like, that's really interesting, actually, you know? So be authentic. I'm trying to see, yeah, those are my main pieces of feedback. Any questions? Yes. Any questions on that? All right. Hopefully that was helpful.
I actually, I wondered on whether he could have woven in an example from another role of why this company? Because that's I often struggle with.
Yeah, that's a good question. If you've worked at a similar company,
Well, if you haven't worked at a similar company, but you're trying to extrapolate.
okay, sure. If there's bottom line is anything that's like honest and value added and specific and authentic and meaningful, if there's like, it sounds like you have a thought in your head. If there is something that actually relates to a prior company, or maybe you're genuinely like, it's a really good point you make, Faye, because it's like, why are you interested in the industry of social media in general? Maybe your prior role got you interested in actually moving into this sector. Why are you interested in the sector and let alone the company? That's a great way of thinking about it. Like, what is this product? Why is it interesting to you? How and when did you get interested in it? The story about that, any genuine story about how and when and why and where you got interested, I love that. I absolutely love that. So thank you. That's a great point. The bottom line is the genuine interest. If you can share that, it is just that we are humans at heart. We know what's going to resonate. Authentic answers resonate. Don't force it. And it's really hard when it's such a big company. We all would be happy to work there, maybe, but be specific. What does it mean to you? Why are you personally interested in what it is they do? How does it relate to you, right? Like how and when and why and where did you get interested? That's a really great point, Faye. Thank you.
And wait, before you go on to the next volunteer, so my question is, for instance, with Facebook, is if you're following and you've done your research and you say, well, you know, they know that Sheryl Sandberg left, that she was very involved in the ad side of the business, and now they're moving in this other direction, and that really excites you. Does that sound disingenuous, like you're trying to brown nose the teacher, or does that sound like, hey, I really did my homework and I know where the company is going?
Good question. I would be a little careful about sensitive things like that, but I think it's good to show that you've done your homework. So in this specific case, I would say something like, you just want to be careful in how you phrase things. So you could say something like, you know, given the recent news, I've seen that there's actually, you know, a bit of a new strategy and a bit of a new direction that the company is going. And guess what? I would rather you tell us, what about that new strategy? What about that new direction is interesting to you? Don't just reference like, oh, it's like a new direction. Like just say like, I've seen that there's some talks around being able to focus on A, B, C, or D. And actually that's really, really interesting to me because of what? So referencing your homework, referencing the news, absolutely. If it's a dicey situation with leadership changes, I might just reference with a vague way, but it's more so saying it's about forward looking. It's about what are they working on? What are they talking about? What are they doing? Where are they going? And why does that mean something to you? Why is that interesting to you? If you can actually prove that you actually understand their strategy and there's something unique about like what they're doing, how they're doing it, what they're trying to do.
I'm muting.
Sorry, if you can reference, you know, anything about the homework and like sometimes with, you know, you can just really prove your knowledge of the space by way of what it is you share here, right? So like imagine they started talking about a certain strategy and you're really an expert in that strategy, or you've been reading up in your free time about, you know, AI and VR and whatever it is. Say, you know, you could say like, I see that the company's moving in this direction. And actually, you know, for the past year, I've been really reading up on VR and I really think it's actually whatever. Say the authentic thing. Like if there's something in the news, if there's something in that you can relate to, the more honest you can share, the more specific you can share, the more you show that your homework is done and the more you show of like actually how it relates to you, that's going to shine.
So Rachel.
Yes.
Hi, quick question, quick comment, not even a question.
Yeah.
In reference to Meta, I just had an interview with them. They did not ask me why I wanted what I liked about the role or what I liked about the company. And I told them, honestly, I said, to be honest with you, I joined Facebook 1.5 years ago. My thinking always was that I didn't want to be on a social media platform where someone I haven't spoken to in 25 years will all of a sudden hunt me down and find me.
Yeah.
I was like, if I don't talk to them now, why in the world will I want to talk to them later?
Yeah.
That was my thinking, but I didn't say that to them. But I liked the role that was posted, and that's the reason why I applied for the role.
Yeah.
It was actually a relaunch role, which
Yeah.
was really, really nice. And, you know, it was a great meeting, great interaction. And, you know, obviously I'm still waiting for the answer. But in reference to that question that you had said, why do you like the role? Why do you like the company? In a different company I had an interview with probably a few months ago, I kind of said something that I thought was funny, but true. I said, I don't want to sound like a stalker, but I have actually always liked this company. I like their mentality. I like their goals. I like the people that I've seen who work there through LinkedIn and who I've met. And I really, really think that with my knowledge of X, I can really do a good job in your company in helping it get to the next level. You know, and it was,
I
in
love
my
that.
opinion,
Yeah.
it's a goal. It was a
Yeah.
goal to get to that company.
Yeah. So two things. So on the Facebook one, I think it's okay to be honest. If you're a new user, like, I mean, I wouldn't like go into like, oh, I didn't want to connect with people 20 years ago, but I think it's okay for you to be honest and say, I'm actually new to this, because you'd be surprised. They want dynamic thinkers. They want fresh eyes. And I think that's okay. As long as you're explaining, if they ask you, why do you want to be here? Of course, you have to answer whatever the question is. Where your other example, I would just always be careful with the words that you use. And I think, you know, I know you're not a stalker, but just don't, there's certain words just don't say. So just say, I've been an avid follower, or I've been your #1 fan, or I've been such an ambassador of this brand. You can show in your tone and in your words how closely you have followed a brand, in your energy, in your tone, in your words, but just be a little careful on red flag, yellow flag words, and you can still get that message. And I love what you're saying, because you're like, I have followed this company. I love the mission. I love what you guys are doing. I've followed you really closely in terms of, you know, paying attention to what's been happening in this company. But again, I really like to show versus tell. What is it about this company? I know you're just referencing an example, but what about that company? Why do you follow them? Why do you think it's so interesting? Why did you get hooked on it? Tell them, you know, show versus tell. But I agree with you. You can tell them whether you're a new user or whether you're an avid follower, as long as you explain, first of all, as long as you answer their question and you can be honest, you can be specific, you can show how it relates to you, or how and when it relates to you, and how you got started with it, and why you got started with it, and why you follow it, and why you didn't follow it. That's all okay. You're being honest, you're being specific, you're showing your fit, and you're showing your interest versus just saying you're a fit, you know. So that's a great example. So thank you. I do see a question.
There was a
So
question back at 11 o'clock by Gerard. Do you see that one? Is it okay to say I don't have much experience in A or B, but I can quickly master new areas such as when?
okay, so Gerard, great question. If you don't have experience with something, there's a few things you can do. So like #1, you can either try to pick a story that is the most relevant example possible, and then explain how it might differ given what it is they're asking. If you feel like you have something remotely relevant, I still like to try to give a story. If you really don't have anything relevant, I would try to use a conceptual framework to explain your understanding of what that role is all of, or what the project, you know, what the thing is, how explain your understanding of whether it's a process, a project, whatever it may be. And then also you can explain how you would approach it. You can reference, I would say briefly, that like an example of, you could say, you know, in the past when I had to learn a new tool or a new process, you know, I was able to learn that in a matter of a week or however long. And you can just say, you know, I really did self-research. I learned by shadowing peers, and within X amount of time, I was able to get up to speed. I would just, you know, really think about the amount of real estate or space airtime that you give, you know, talking about, like, it's okay to briefly say that you've learned things quickly in the past, but I'd rather you blow them away with how deeply you understand whatever it is they're saying to you, even if you haven't done it before. What is the most relevant example? Is there a transferable skill? Is there a story where there was something similar? I like to jump into this question, like, don't say like, you know, I've never done that, but I have done. Just say, a relevant story that I can share is, right? And then you can say, or you can say, my understanding of, you know, this type of topic is, or how I would approach it. You know, you can just literally remove the, no, I haven't done that. Just say all the other stuff. So yes, you can explain when you've learned something quickly and how long it took. You can explain a story that's as relevant as humanly possible. You can explain your understanding of that process or that tool, how you would approach it. Any and all of those are tools in your toolbox for a question like this. I just wouldn't say the words like, no, you know, I haven't done that. Just skip over that part and say all the rest. Any introduction tips for career changers on how they can highlight transferable skills? So let's see. Okay, so Priya, it depends what you mean. Like if you're introducing yourself, if say it's the tell me about yourself question, I like to have a framework to do your background, your strengths, and your direction. Again, when you practice that, it is your decision of what you highlight from your background, what you highlight from your strengths, and how you explain your direction. You get to own the story. So it takes a little legwork. You can actually write this stuff down. How do you want to phrase it that actually does bridge the gap between your background and your direction? So, you know, the tell me about yourself, it's something you can really, you know, get careful with how you want to phrase it. Otherwise, I would say, you know, as you answer other questions, you just want to think about the language that you're using. Like if you're telling a story, obviously you want to try to tell relevant stories given the skills that they're looking for. If they're looking for, you know, your ability to do research and data analysis, you can say where and how you've done that in another setting or another context or a similar capacity. And then you can explain how you would do it differently given what it is they're asking or how it would differ at their team and their role. The other key thing with transferable skills is the language. So if you're coming from a teacher and you're trying to be a project manager, instead of you saying students, you just say like, I supported 30 individuals and I had to analyze their performance and I had to measure on a monthly basis, you know, where the areas for opportunity were. And I had to, you know, give individual performance reports and blah, 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 blah. You can say the same thing with words that mean the same thing, but you don't have to say the jargony specific words that were related to your prior path. Try to use words that mean the same thing that are applicable to the future. That's my quick thoughts on transferable skills.
There was a question about weakness. That's always the tough one. How do you answer the weakness question?
Okay, good, yes. I find it difficult to decline requests, but I'm improving by saying that I want to help. Oh, I see, but previous time commitments and can schedule a future time to respond. Okay, so Eileen, the weakness question, what they're trying to look for is self-awareness. Are you genuinely telling me the thing that is your actual area for improvement? Do not make it up. Do not say I'm a perfectionist. Like, you have to be honest with yourself. What is the actual thing that you need to work on? So half the battle of interview prep is literally thinking about the actual answer, okay? And then the latter half of it is how do you practice saying that in a great way? So with the weakness question, you have to be honest. And then you have to just simply show that you have that self-awareness, and you have to show that you have practical guardrails in place so that you guardrail yourself from letting those weaknesses get in your way. Right. And so, you know, how you want to show that there's something really tangible. Right? Like, for example, if you need to remind yourself of something, maybe you put it in your calendar once a week, or maybe you set a timer if you take too long on projects. Like, literally give them like an actual tangible thing that you have put into your own personal operating system to make sure that you know, guardrail your own weakness, self-awareness, and plus, how do you work around it? To me, that's kind of the nutshell of the weakness question.
All right, we're going to take a break here for 2 seconds so that we can fill out the evaluation, and maybe we'll get a chance because we have a hard stop at 11:30.
Yes.
Our speaker has other engagements. So there we go. In the chat box. What happened? Ugh, I forgot the link again. It's always at the top. Hold on 1 second. I didn't copy the link. That doesn't help you. 1 second, here it comes. There we go. All right, let's click on that link and we're gonna give you 3 minutes. We're gonna time it. Please fill this out as best as you can. It helps our funders, it helps our speakers, it helps everybody. And we really need to get as much of detail as we can. And then maybe we'll have a really quick like mock something if we have a time, or if we just have questions, we'll do that. So go ahead, Nancy, start the clock. I gotta look for the music.
Thanks, Priya.
Less than a minute left.
Music stopped. We done?
Yes, we are.
There was a
Perfect timing.
question here. That was perfect. There was a question that I just missed that I thought is one that really should be covered, but now I can't find it. And I don't remember what it was. Well, starting again. Stop. Goodbye.
I saw it also.
Oh, it was a question about when you're interviewing for a position that's at a lower level than what you used to do before. How do you spend on the
Yes.
interview?
I had that and I bombed it.
Sorry. Okay. Say,
If you're transitioning to something that has a lesser skill set than what you had before, how do you appear to be willing to take a lower level position?
You want to do the mock interview on that one? Because I bombed that one.
yeah, I would say, yeah. Why don't we practice it for
Okay.
sure?
Go ahead. Faye's volunteered, so if you can pin her.
Okay.
Or whatever.
Here
There
we
we go. Perfect.
All right. So, Faye, it seems like you have a lot of experience. This role seems a little bit like it might be, a bit junior for you. Why do you think, this is a fit for you?
That's a really great question and something I've given some thought to. The area of real estate law which is somewhat new to me. I do have a little bit of experience from reviewing leases and looking for contractual key dates and obligations, but you know, the area is one that I am not that expert in, as I am in all phases of full cycle contract life management. So this, you know, I feel like I can step in with helping your team right away, and that it'll be a win-win in the long run.
Okay.
That was better than what I actually said, but I still don't like it.
You know, this is a hard question to answer. And it might be, you know, something to look at, you know, in the broader scheme, we'd have to understand the context as to, you know, why you actually are. Like, if you're genuinely interested in pivoting, and if that's the actual answer, is like you really want to pivot to real estate law and it's like a little newer, in which case you're okay to start lower, I would actually just say that, meaning, like, I think you said it, but I think I would just be more explicit to say, like, you know, and maybe you reiterate your background and say, like, after, you know, X number, I don't always love number of years, but you could say, after honing my expertise in A, B, C, and D, I'm really interested in, you know, adding this real estate law to my set of skills. And I recognize that in order to get into that newer area, you know, it might mean that I have to start a little bit junior, but I'm really excited to grow. I know that I can leverage my, you know, management capabilities and all of the skills that I've brought at more senior levels by being able to learn this new content and this new area of law. And I would be really interested to grow, but because it's a topic area that I'm really hoping to add to my skill set, it's something that's, you know, very much, you know, my intended next career direction. And I really want to, you know, explore that area as, you know, my next step in my career. If that's the actual answer, I would just say that. If that's not the answer, I would actually just think about, are you applying to the right roles, right? Because, you know, maybe it's something we should just talk about in terms of like your direction in general. So, you know, it has to really be compelling enough, because, you know, the worry is, first of all, there's a lot of different components to this, right? First of all, the salary question, you know, might have come up before or after this. They need to make sure you're okay with that. At a junior level, it's going to be a different salary than, you know, that's a component. But I think if you're really applying to something more junior, it has to be clear that, like, this is the next step for you, and this is the area that you really want to work in. Why do you want to work in that area? What, tell us that you've put some thought into the fact that, like, this would be the most exciting sort of next step in your career as it relates to growing your expertise or whatever it may be. Like, why is real estate law actually like the interesting to you to work on right now? Like, show versus tell, instead of just saying you're so interested. Like, okay, you've had all these different areas of expertise. You're either excited to just simply add another area, or what about it is actually intriguing and important and interesting to you to work on. So it's a little less about your fit for the role. It's a little bit more about your interest, because that's what's confusing here. And so if it's a new area of growth, I get, you know, that makes sense. But why, you know, they want to make sure you're not just going to like jump ship tomorrow if you get another role that's more commensurate. They want to know, like, why genuinely is this something that you actually feel is really the best, strongest, most exciting fit that you would be really happy to be in. So if it's not something you feel is a fit, let's go back to the drawing board. If it is something you feel like is a really interesting fit for you, explain why real estate law is so interesting to you. Like, bring it back to the work itself. If they believe that you're like excited to actually like whatever the role is all about, tell us, what are you excited to actually work on? What are you excited to learn about? Like, you could say that in like very briefly, but it will prove a lot if you can like really explain like why, you know, it's so interesting to you. That's what they're assessing is, you know, are you going to be happy here? And by the way, the salary piece would be a separate component of their worry here. But yeah, that's what comes to my mind.
Right, that's terrific. All right, so we got like a minute and a half left, and I know our speaker has to run. So before we even let her run, let us say thank you so much. This was amazing. I learned a ton of very interesting stuff. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for more role play, but maybe in part 2, we'll see. But this has been terrific, and I think a lot of people have learned a lot. Can you share the slide again with your website and everything so people can see that? People did ask in the chat about sharing the slides.
Yeah, that's fine. I can just send that to you if that's
Okay.
okay. Yeah.
All right.
I'll do-
And we're so grateful. This is Rachel's second time with us, so that's been amazing. It's so generous of her to share her time with us, and I really would like to thank her very much. She does have on her website a bunch of great videos having to do with interviewing. She was telling me before the program started about this whole process that she's doing and these live whatever things she's doing on LinkedIn, and they're all on her website. So go to her website and you can watch them then, because the key, as she said, is practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better you are. And that's terrific. For those of you who are not too busy, landed, not interested, our program coming up on June 23rd is how to get back on track and turn motivation. And we know that's the really tough part about just keeping doing this day in and day out, especially after you've had some rejections. So I have a great speaker who has volunteered. She's wrote a book about it. Her name is Darcy Eichenberg, and she's amazing. And she's going to come speak in 2 weeks. All of you have been on the program. We have your email address. The only thing you'll ever get from me is information about our next program. So we will let you know about that. In other ways, just everybody stay healthy. I'm going to say something very controversial right now, which is COVID's not over. And so just be careful out there. I had more appointments canceled in the last 3 weeks because either they or someone in their family had COVID. So just be careful, stay safe, stay healthy, stay cool. And Rachel, again, thank you so much. And, if anyone lands or has a great story, please, my stuff was, and don't forget, go to those 3 little dots now and hit save chat again. So you've got the whole chat. And you can go back and reference any people who are looking, some people about networking. If you want to reach out, network. It's the only part that I miss about being live is that, people used to hang out in the room after our programs were done for like 45 minutes an hour, network with each other. So it's a little harder virtually, but take the effort, reach out to the people on the chat box, network with them, and hopefully you'll all be landed and you'll tell me good news. So on that note, I'm going to sign off and everybody have a great weekend. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.